He didn't even look at the babies. Not once. After 12 hours of labor, fighting for my life to bring his triplets into the world, my husband, CEO Julian Thorne, walked into the recovery room. He didn't hold my hand. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just tossed a manila folder onto my trembling legs and said 3 words that shattered my world. "Sign the papers." I thought I had lost everything. My marriage, my dignity, my future. But Julian made one fatal mistake. He didn't check the mail that morning. He didn't know that the penniless woman he was discarding had just become the sole heir to a global empire worth billions. And revenge? It was going to be expensive. The sterile scent of antiseptic was the only thing keeping Eleanor grounded. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was a stark contrast to the chaotic drumming of her own heart. She lay exhausted against the stiff hospital pillows, her body feeling like it had been run over by a freight train. 3. She had delivered 3 babies. 2 boys and a girl. They were currently in the NICU, small but fighting, just down the hall. Elena hadn't even had the chance to hold them all at once yet. The nurses had whisked them away for checks, assuring her they were perfect, just a little early. The heavy oak door to the VIP suite swung open. Elena's tired eyes lit up, expecting to see a nurse with a bundle, or perhaps, if she dared to hope, her husband, finally ready to be a father. It was him. Julian Thorne, the CEO of Thorne Enterprises, looked as immaculate as ever. His charcoal suit was tailored to perfection, not a single crease visible. His dark hair was slicked back, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass. He didn't look like a man who had been pacing a waiting room. He looked like he had just stepped out of a board meeting. "Julian," Elena breathed, her voice raspy. She tried to sit up, wincing at the sharp pain in her abdomen. "Did you see them? The nurse said the girl looks just like your mother." Julian didn't answer. He didn't move toward the bed. He didn't offer a glass of water. He stood at the foot of the bed, his icy blue eyes scanning her face with an expression that wasn't love or even relief. It was annoyance. "Stop moving, Elena. You look pathetic," he said, his voice a smooth, deep baritone that usually made her knees weak. Today, it made her blood run cold. I just gave birth, Julian," she whispered, confusion clouding her mind. "To your children." "To children," he corrected, pulling a thick manila envelope from inside his jacket. He tossed it onto the bed. It landed on her legs with a heavy thud. "Whether they are mine remains to be seen, though the DNA test is already ordered. But that's a matter for the lawyers." Elena stared at the envelope. "What is this?" "Divorce papers," Julian said, checking his Rolex. "I need you to sign them now. My driver is waiting downstairs. I have a gala to attend in an hour." The room spun. Elena gripped the sheets. "Divorce? Julian, we have a family now. You can't be serious. Is this panic? Is this the pressure?" Julian laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Don't be naive, Elena. You were a placeholder, a quiet, mousy librarian who looked good enough on my arm to convince the board I was a family man when I needed to secure the merger with the Asian markets. That merger is closed. The stock is up. You've served your purpose." "I'm your wife," Elena cried out, tears stinging her eyes. "I love you." "And that makes you weak," Julian sneered. "Look at you. You have no connections, no money, no pedigree. You are a liability. I need a partner who brings something to the table, someone with fire, someone with status." As if on cue, the door opened again. The clicking of high heels on the linoleum floor echoed like gunshots. Isabella Vance walked in, the daughter of a steel magnate, Isabella was everything Elena was not: loud, glamorous, and vicious. She was wearing a red dress that cost more than Elena's parents had made in their lifetimes. "Is it done yet, darling?" Isabella purred, walking straight to Julian and linking her arm through his. She didn't even look at Eleanor. "Almost," Julian said, his voice softening instantly as he looked at his mistress. "She's being difficult." Eleanor felt bile rise in her throat. "Isabella, you're doing this now? Here?" Isabella finally deigned to look at her, a smirk playing on her red lips. "Oh, honey, don't take it personally. Julian and I have been together since before you got pregnant. We were just waiting for the heirs to arrive. Although, triplets? That's a bit excessive, don't you think? Messier to clean up." "You are monsters," Elena sobbed, clutching the envelope. "We are realistic," Julian snapped. "Now sign. The terms are generous. You get a small apartment in Queens, a monthly stipend for 2 years, and I take full custody of the children once they are old enough for boarding school. Until then, you can be their nanny. Unpaid, of course. Consider it room and board." "I won't sign," Elena spat, a sudden surge of adrenaline fueling her. "I won't let you take them. I'll fight you." Julian leaned over the bed, his face inches from hers. The cruelty in his eyes was terrifying. "Fight me with what, Elena? You have $12 in your bank account. I have an army of lawyers who can prove you are mentally unstable, unfit, and indigent. If you don't sign, I will make sure you never see those babies again. I will bury you in so much legal red tape you'll be begging for a public defender." He uncapped a fountain pen, a Mont Blanc she had bought him for their first anniversary, and held it out. "Sign, or lose them forever." Elena's hand trembled as she took the pen. She looked at the door, praying for a doctor, a nurse, anyone to stop this. But the hospital staff knew better than to interrupt Julian Thorne. He owned the wing. With tears blinding her vision, she scribbled her signature on the dotted line. She felt a piece of her soul die with the ink. Julian snatched the papers back immediately, checking the signature. "Good. The car will take you to your new accommodations once you are discharged. Do not come back to the penthouse. Your things have already been packed and sent to storage." "Let's go, Julian," Isabella said, checking her reflection in the darkened window. "The press is waiting at the gala. We need to announce our engagement." "Engagement?" Elena whispered, the word escaping her like a dying breath. "Out with the old, in with the new," Isabella winked. Without a backward glance, the two of them turned and walked out. The door swung shut, leaving Eleanor in a silence that was louder than screaming. She broke. She curled into a ball, ignoring the stitches pulling at her skin, and wailed. She cried for her babies, who had a father who saw them as assets. She cried for the 3 years of marriage she had devoted to a man who saw her as a merger tool. She cried for her own stupidity. She was alone. Truly, completely alone. Or so she thought. 10 minutes later, while Eleanor was still staring blankly at the wall, trying to figure out how she would buy diapers on a stipend, there was a polite knock at the door. Eleanor wiped her face, hastily. "Go away," she croaked. "Please, just leave me alone." The door opened anyway. But it wasn't a nurse, and it wasn't Julian coming back to twist the knife. An older man stood there. He was dressed in a suit that looked old-fashioned, but expensive, tweed with a pocket watch chain visible. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and carried a worn leather briefcase. "Mrs. Elena Thorne?" he asked softly. "It's just Elena now," she said bitterly. "If you're one of Julian's lawyers here to add a clause, just leave it on the table." The man smiled gently and stepped inside, closing the door firmly behind him. "I assure you, my dear, I do not work for Mr. Thorne. In fact, Mr. Thorne has been trying to hire my firm for years, and we have repeatedly declined." Elena frowned. "Who are you?" "My name is Arthur Pennyworth," he said, setting his briefcase on the bedside table where the divorce papers had just been. "I am the executor of the estate of the late Silas Vane." Elena shook her head. "I don't know a Silas Vane." "No," Arthur said, clicking the latches of his briefcase open. "You wouldn't. He was your great-uncle on your mother's side, estranged from the family for 50 years. He was an eccentric man, a recluse. He passed away 3 days ago in Zurich." "I'm sorry to hear that," Elena said, though she had no emotional capacity left to care. "But why are you here?" "I have nothing." Arthur pulled out a document. It was thick, bound in blue velvet with gold leaf edges. It looked ancient and important. Silas Vane was not just a recluse, Elena. He was the silent founder of Vane Global Logistics. He owned the shipping routes that move 40% of the world's oil. He owned diamond mines in South Africa and tech startups in Silicon Valley. He had no children, no wife. Arthur paused, his eyes twinkling. He spent the last 10 years watching his extended family from afar. He saw how your parents struggled. He saw how you worked 2 jobs to put yourself through college. And he saw how you married Julian Thorne. "He must be disappointed in me then," Elena whispered. "On the contrary," Arthur said. "He saw a woman with a good heart who was being taken advantage of. He wrote this will 2 weeks ago, shortly before his heart failed. He left specific instructions that it was not to be read until you faced a moment of total ruin." Arthur looked at the empty space where Julian had stood. "I was waiting in the lobby. I saw Mr. Thorne and Miss Vance leave. I assume the ruin has arrived?" Elena nodded slowly. "I signed the divorce papers. I have nothing." Arthur smiled, a wide, genuine grin. "Correction, Elena. You had nothing, according to the terms of this will, as the sole living beneficiary of Silas Vane. You are now the owner of assets totaling $42 billion. You are also the new majority shareholder of the bank that holds Julian Thorne's business loans." Elena's jaw dropped. The monitor beeped faster. "What?" "You heard me," Arthur said, handing her a heavy fountain pen, much nicer than Julian's. "Now we have a lot of work to do. But first, would you like to buy this hospital? The service seems a bit lacking." The pen felt heavy in Elena's hand, heavier than the divorce papers had felt only moments before. But this weight was different. It wasn't the crushing burden of loss. It was the grounding weight of power. 42 billion, Elena repeated, the number feeling alien on her tongue. She looked at the baby's bassinets, which the nurses had just wheeled back in at Arthur's insistence. They were sleeping, unaware that their father had just sold them out for a merger, or that their mother had just become one of the wealthiest women on the planet. "And the bank," Arthur Pennyworth reminded her, pouring a cup of tea from a silver service he had seemingly conjured from nowhere. "Sterling Capital, the institution that currently holds the mortgage on Mr. Thorne's headquarters, his personal estates, and the line of credit keeping his company afloat during this expansion phase." Elena sat up straighter. The pain in her body was still there, but it was being drowned out by a cold, simmering fury. She looked at the divorce papers on the nightstand, the ones she had signed. "He thinks I'm weak," she whispered. "He thinks I'm going to go to that apartment in Queens and fade away." "Mr. Thorne is a man who only sees value in what can be monetized," Arthur said, adjusting his glasses. "He failed to appraise you correctly." "Now, Mrs. Thorne—" "Vane," Elena interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "My name is Elena Vane, And my children, on their birth certificates, they will be Vane's. Can we do that? Before he files?" Arthur smiled, a shark-like glint in his eyes. "With the resources we now have, we can do anything. I have a team of paralegals downstairs who can ensure the paperwork Julian's driver took is misplaced, long enough for us to file new documents. By the time Julian realizes, the children will legally bear your name. And since he signed away rights to any children born of the marriage in his haste to disown them to avoid child support calculations, he has legally severed his own claim." Elena looked at her reflection in the darkened window. She looked pale, exhausted, and broken. "I don't look like a billionaire. I look like a victim." "Money buys many things, Elena," Arthur said, standing up, including a new image. "But first, we must leave this place. This hospital wing is funded by the Thorne family. It is distasteful. Where will we go? The penthouse at the St. Regis is prepared. A medical team is waiting there for you and the triplets. Security has been hired, former Mossad, very discreet. And I have taken the liberty of contacting a stylist. If you are going to go to war, you must wear armor." As the reality set in, Elena swung her legs over the side of the bed. She winced, but she stood. She walked over to the bassinets. She touched the cheek of her son, Noah, then Elias, then her daughter, Sophia. "He didn't want you," she whispered to them. "He threw us away like trash. But I promise you, he will regret the day he turned his back on us." The exit from the hospital was the first test. As Arthur led Elena, now dressed in a trench coat brought by an assistant, toward the private elevator, they were intercepted. The head nurse, a woman named Sharon, who had always looked down on Eleanor at Julian's behest, stepped in front of the wheelchair. "Mrs. Thorne, you cannot leave," Sharon snapped, her tone dripping with condescension. Mr. Thorne gave explicit instructions. "You are to be discharged to the driver waiting at the service entrance. He doesn't want you making a scene in the lobby." Elena signaled for Arthur to stop the wheelchair. She slowly stood up, ignoring the trembling in her legs. "First," Elena said, her voice low but projecting clearly, "it is Miss Vane. Second, I do not take orders from my ex-husband. And third," she looked at Arthur. Arthur stepped forward, handing Sharon a business card. "We are transferring Miss Vane to home care. If you attempt to impede her movement, I will have the hospital board of directors on the phone in 30 seconds. And considering Miss Vane just purchased the debt on this building's new oncology wing, I suggest you move." Sharon looked at the card, then at Eleanor, her face paling. I didn't know." "Get out of my way," Eleanor said. Sharon scrambled aside. They didn't go to the service entrance where the rusty sedan Julian had hired was waiting. They went to the roof. A helicopter was waiting, its blades cutting through the night air. As they lifted off, Elena looked down at the city lights. Somewhere down there, Julian was at a gala, drinking champagne with Isabella, laughing about how easily he had disposed of his burden. "Laugh while you can, Julian," she thought. The clock is ticking. The annual Thorne Enterprises charity ball was the event of the season. It was held in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, a venue dripping with gold leaf and crystal chandeliers. Julian Thorne stood at the center of the room, a glass of scotch in his hand. He looked triumphant. In the 3 months since the divorce, his stock had risen. His engagement to Isabella Vance was official, and the mess of his ex-wife had been completely silent. "You look tense, darling," Isabella said, sliding up beside him. She was wearing a custom Versace gown, diamonds dripping from her neck. "Relax. The merger with the Italians is happening tonight. Once Signor Moretti signs, you'll be untouchable." "I know. Julian said, scanning the room. I have a feeling. My bankers have been odd lately. Sterling Capital sent a new representative to the meeting yesterday. They're auditing my personal accounts. Routine, Isabella dismissed. They know you're good for it. Besides, who could possibly challenge you? You're Julian Thorne. Julian smirked. True. And the little problem is rotting away in Queens. My lawyers say she hasn't even cashed the stipend checks yet. Probably too proud. Or too stupid, Isabella laughed. Suddenly the music stopped. The chatter in the room died down. The massive double doors at the top of the grand staircase swung open. Usually, guests arrived quietly. But this was an entrance. A hush fell over the crowd as a woman stepped onto the landing. She was stunning. She wore a dress made of midnight blue velvet that hugged her curves like a second skin, with a slit that went up to her thigh. The back was open, revealing flawless, glowing skin. But it was the jewelry that made the room gasp. Around her neck was the heart of the ocean, or a sapphire so large and rare it rivaled it. It was surrounded by flawless diamonds. On her head sat a subtle, modern tiara of diamonds intertwined with black gold. She didn't look like a librarian. She looked like a queen. "Who is that?" Isabella whispered, her grip tightening on Julian's arm. "I've never seen that dress in any catalogue. It must be custom haute couture." Julian squinted. The woman's hair was different, cut into a sharp, chic bob that framed her face. Her makeup was bold, accentuating her eyes. She walked with a predatory grace, descending the stairs slowly, every eye in the room fixed on her. Two men in black suits trailed behind her, security. And next to her walked Arthur Pennyworth. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, the light hit her face fully. Julian dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing in the silence. Elena? It was impossible. The woman he had left, bleeding and broken in a hospital bed 3 months ago, looked expensive. She radiated an aura of wealth that made Isabella's diamonds look like costume jewelry. Eleanor walked straight through the crowd, which parted for her like the Red Sea. She didn't stop until she was standing directly in front of Julian and Isabella. She looked Julian up and down, a faint smile playing on her lips. It wasn't a smile of greeting. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a wounded deer. "Hello, Julian," she said. Her voice was different, too. Gone was the timid whisper. This voice was rich, confident, and cold as ice. Lovely party. A bit tacky with the gold leaf, but I suppose that's your style. "What are you doing here?" Julian hissed, lowering his voice. "Security. How did she get in? This is a private event." "I invited myself," Elena said calmly. "And your security works for the firm that provides guards for Vane Global. They know better than to touch their boss." "Vane Global?" Isabella laughed nervously. "What are you talking about? You're a broke librarian. Did you sleep with some old man to rent that dress?" Eleanor turned her gaze to Isabella. She didn't get angry. She just looked bored. "Isabella, still wearing red? It clashes with your desperation." Before Isabella could screech a retort, a heavy hand landed on Julian's shoulder. It was Signor Moretti, the Italian investor Julian needed for his merger. "Julian!" Moretti boomed, ignoring the tension. "I see you have met our new partner." Julian blinked. "Partner?" Moretti turned to Elena and bowed deeply, taking her hand and kissing it. "Signora Vane, it is an honor. I was just telling Julian that the deal could not proceed without the approval of the majority shareholder." "Majority shareholder?" Julian felt the room spinning. "Moretti, what are you saying? I own 51% of Thorne Enterprises." Not anymore, Elena said softly. She signaled to Arthur, who produced a tablet and held it up for Julian to see. You see, Julian, Elena explained, when you leveraged your personal shares to fund your expansion into Asia, you used them as collateral with sterling capital. The terms of your loan stated that if your liquidity dropped below a certain point, the bank had the right to call the loan or seize the collateral. My liquidity is fine, Julian shouted, drawing stares from the entire room. Was fine, Elena corrected. Until this morning, when Sterling Capital, which I own, called in all your loans immediately. You couldn't pay. So, per the contract, your shares were seized. I bought them from the bank 5 minutes ago. She leaned in close, so only he could hear. I own your company, Julian. I own this building. I own the chair you sit in, and the name on the door. Julian stepped back, his face grey. You can't. You were nothing. I was your wife, Elena said, her eyes flashing with a sudden, terrifying fire. I was the mother of your children, and you discarded me because you wanted status. Well, Julian, do I have enough status for you now? She turned to the crowd, raising her voice. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I am Elena Vane. As the new owner of Thorn Enterprises, I have a few announcements to make regarding the future of my company, the first being a change in leadership. She looked back at Julian, who was trembling. Security, Elena said, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. Please escort Mr. Thorn and his mistress off the premises. They are trespassing. 2 large guards stepped forward, grabbing Julian by the arms. Get your hands off me, Julian roared, struggling. I am the CEO. You can't do this. Actually, Arthur Pennyworth interjected calmly, the board just voted via emergency conference call. You were terminated for gross negligence and reputational damage. You are unemployed, Mr. Thorn. As the guards dragged a screaming Julian and a sobbing Isabella toward the exit, cameras flashed blindly. The press, who had been there to cover a merger, were now witnessing the most spectacular corporate assassination in history. Elena watched them go, her face impassive. But inside, a tiny part of the old Elena, the one who had cried in the hospital, felt a weight lift. She turned back to Moretti and the stunned crowd. She picked up a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. Now, she said, raising the glass, shall we discuss business? Julian Thorn sat in a dimly lit office in Lower Manhattan. It wasn't the glass-walled corner office he was used to. It smelled of stale coffee and old paper. Across from him sat Marcus Stone, a lawyer known as the Butcher, for his ability to shred opponents in high-stakes divorces. You're telling me, Stone said, leaning back in his creaking leather chair, that your wife inherited $42 billion before she signed the divorce papers? Yes, Julian slammed his hand on the desk. She defrauded me. We were still legally married when her great-uncle died. That inheritance is marital property. Half of it belongs to me. Thorn Enterprises belongs to me. Isabella, sitting in the corner and scrolling furiously through her phone, scoffed. If you get it back, darling. Right now, social media is calling you the billion-dollar loser. Team Elena is trending worldwide. My sponsorship with Cartier just got paused. You need to fix this, Julian. Julian ignored her, his eyes fixed on Stone. Can we sue? We can, Stone mused, tapping a pen against his chin. But Eleanor Vane has Arthur Pennyworth. That old man is a legal fortress. If we attack the inheritance directly, they'll bury us in paperwork for a decade. You don't have the money for a decade-long war, Julian. Then what? Stone smiled, revealing teeth that looked too white, too sharp. We go for the emotional jugular. The children. Julian blinked. The triplets. I don't want them. They're loud, messy, and expensive. No, Stone corrected. They are leverage. Think about it. Elena Vane is now one of the richest women in the world. What is the one thing money can't buy? Public sympathy. Right now, she's the hero. But if we paint her as a vindictive, cold-hearted billionaire who is keeping a loving father away from his newborn babies, the narrative shifts. Julian began to see the picture. I play the victim. Exactly. We file an emergency custody motion. We claim you signed those papers under duress, or that you were in a state of shock. We claim you've been begging to see your children, and she's using her new wealth to wall you out. We demand 50-50 custody. And then? And then, Stone whispered, when she realizes that fighting you means dragging those babies through a public media circus, she will settle. She will write you a check for 5, maybe 10 billion just to make you go away. Or she gives you the company back in exchange for full custody. Julian sat back, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was diabolical. It was disgusting. It was perfect. She's weak, Julian said, remembering the crying woman in the hospital bed. She loves those kids more than anything. She'll pay. Good, Stone said. But we need to find them first. Do you know where they are? No. She moved out of the St. Regis last week. No one knows where she is. Isabella looked up from her phone. I might. I have a friend who works at Petit Tresor, the most exclusive baby boutique in the city. She said a personal shopper dropped $20,000 on 3 custom strollers yesterday. Delivery address was a fortress-like estate in the Hamptons, the Vane estate. Julian stood up, adjusting his suit jacket, off the rack, as his tailor had cut off his credit. Get the paperwork ready, Marcus. I'm going to go pay my family a visit, and I'm bringing the cameras. Meanwhile, in the sun-drenched solarium of the Vane estate, Elena was experiencing a different kind of challenge. He just won't stop crying, she murmured, rocking Elias gently. Noah was asleep in a motorized bassinet, and Sophia was watching the light dance on the ceiling with wide, curious eyes. Arthur Pennyworth sat nearby, reviewing a stack of documents. Colic, perhaps. Or maybe he senses his mother's tension. Eleanor sighed, looking out at the sprawling lawn that led down to the ocean. I'm not tense. I'm prepared. Julian has been too quiet for 2 weeks. He's planning something. We have blocked his attempts to enter the company building, Arthur reported. We have frozen his corporate cards. He is currently living in a hotel in Midtown, and Miss Vance has been seen pawning jewelry. It's not enough, Elena said, her voice hardening. He destroyed me, Arthur. He looked at these beautiful babies and called them a liability. I want him to understand what it feels like to be powerless. Be careful, Elena, Arthur warned softly. When you stare into the abyss stares back. Do not let your desire for revenge consume the peace you are building for these children. I'm not looking for peace, Elena said, kissing Elias's forehead as he finally settled. I'm looking for justice. Her phone buzzed. It was the head of her security detail. Mom, we have a situation at the main gate. It's Mr. Thorne, and he brought a news crew. Elena's blood ran cold. She handed the baby to the nanny who had been waiting in the wings. Take them upstairs. Lock the nursery. Do not open the door for anyone but me or Arthur. What are you going to do? Arthur asked, standing up. Eleanor walked to the mirror, smoothing her silk blouse. She checked her reflection. She didn't see the victim anymore. She saw the CEO. He wants a show, Elena said, grabbing her sunglasses. I'll give him a show. The iron gates of the Vine estate were besieged. Julian stood front and center, looking disheveled on purpose. He had skipped shaving for a day and wore a suit that looked slightly rumpled. He was holding a small, pathetic-looking teddy bear. Behind him, cameras from 3 different news networks were rolling. A reporter from Channel 5 thrust a microphone in his face. "Mr. Thorne, you claim your ex-wife is kidnapping your children?" "It's not kidnapping in the legal sense," Julian said, putting on a masterful performance of a broken man, his voice cracking. "But morally, yes. I haven't seen Noah, Elias, and Sophia since the day they were born. I went to the hospital to bring them home, and they were gone. She used her money to vanish. I just want to hold my babies. I just want to be a father." "And the divorce?" the reporter pressed. "Rumors say you initiated it." "Lies," Julian said, wiping a fake tear. "We were having problems, yes, but I never wanted this. She blindsided me. She got this inheritance and decided I wasn't good enough anymore. She stole my company and my family." The cameras zoomed in on the teddy bear. It was great TV. Suddenly, the massive iron gates groaned. The chatter stopped. The gates swung open slowly. Julian straightened up, expecting a lawyer or a security guard to come out and tell him to leave, which would only make him look more sympathetic on camera. Instead, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom rolled slowly down the driveway. It stopped 10 feet from the gate. The rear door opened. Elena stepped out. She wasn't hiding. She walked straight toward the mob of reporters and Julian, her heels clicking rhythmically on the pavement. She stopped just inside the property line, flanked by 4 armed security guards. "Elena!" Julian cried out, rushing forward until the guard stepped in his path. "Elena, please, let me see them." The reporters shouted questions. "Ms. Vane, is it true you're withholding the children? Did you steal the company?" Elena raised one hand. The gesture was so commanding that the crowd instantly quieted. She took off her sunglasses and looked directly at the camera, then at Julian. "You want to see the children, Julian?" she asked, her voice calm and amplified by the silence. "Yes, they are my flesh and blood," Julian shouted, playing to the audience. "Strange," Elena said, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Because according to this transcript from the hospital room on the day of their birth, your exact words were, 'Whether they are mine remains to be seen. DNA test is ordered. Stop moving. You look pathetic.'" The reporters gasped. Julian froze. I never said that," he stammered. "I have the audio recording from the security camera in the VIP suite," Elena continued, holding up a USB drive. "Would you like me to play it for the press right now? Or perhaps the part where you threw the divorce papers on my legs while I was still bleeding and told me I was a placeholder?" She took a step closer to the gate. "You didn't come here for the children, Julian. You don't even know their middle names. You came here because your credit cards were declined this morning." The reporters were turning their cameras toward Julian now, sensing the shift in the wind. "That's a lie!" Julian yelled, his face turning red, the sad dad act crumbling. "She's manipulating you. She's mentally unstable." "Am I?" Elena signaled to the guard, who handed her a thick file. "This is the affidavit from your mistress, Isabella Vance." Julian's eyes went wide. "Isabella?" "She came to see me this morning," Elena said with a cold smile. It seems she realized that being attached to a sinking ship wasn't good for her complexion. She sold her story to me for a very reasonable price. In this affidavit, she details how you planned to use the children as leverage to extort a settlement. She also provided text messages where you called the triplets expensive noise machines and asked if we could put them up for adoption if you won custody. Elena threw the file over the gate. It landed at Julian's feet. The reporters descended on the file like vultures. One of them picked it up and started reading the text messages aloud for the live broadcast. "Julian Thorne, if I get the kids, how much do you think she'll pay to get them back? 5 billion? 10? The crowd turned on him instantly. The sympathy evaporated, replaced by disgust. "You monster!" someone shouted. Julian looked around, panic setting in. "No, it's fake! It's AI! She forged it!" Elena looked at him with pity. "Go home, Julian. Oh, wait, you don't have one anymore. The bank foreclosed on your penthouse an hour ago." She turned her back on him. "If you ever set foot near my children again," she called out over her shoulder, "I won't just ruin your reputation. I will dismantle your entire existence, brick by brick. You wanted a shark, Julian? You got one?" Elena got back into the Rolls-Royce. The door closed with a solid, expensive thud. The car reversed back up the driveway, leaving Julian alone, surrounded by cameras that were now broadcasting his humiliation to the entire world. He dropped the teddy bear in the dirt. As the car drove away, Elena let out a breath she had been holding. Her hands were shaking. "Well done," Arthur said from the seat beside her. "Brutal. Efficient. Final." "Is it final?" Elena asked, looking at the monitors in the car that showed Julian shoving a cameraman in frustration. "For now," Arthur said. "But a man with nothing left to lose is a dangerous thing. He will not stop. He will try something desperate." "Let him try," Elena said, her eyes flashing. "I have everything to protect now, and I'm just getting started." Back at the gate, Julian watched the car disappear. The reporters were bombarding him with questions about the text messages. He shoved his way through the crowd, his heart pounding with rage. Isabella had betrayed him. Elena had humiliated him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a burner phone, the only one he had left. He dialed a number he had sworn never to use. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't a banker. "It's me," Julian hissed into the phone. "The plan B we talked about? The one with the accident? Do it. Tonight." The storm had rolled in off the Atlantic, turning the Hamptons into a grey, wind-swept landscape. It was the kind of weather that kept people indoors, but Eleanor Vane didn't have a choice. "Are we secure?" Eleanor asked, buckling her seatbelt in the back of the armoured Cadillac Escalade. Next to her, the triplets were secured in their car seats, oblivious to the danger. "Convoy is ready, Ma'am," the head of security, a former Mossad agent named Cohen, replied from the front seat. "We have a lead car and a tail car. Local police have been notified of our route, though we're keeping the destination classified." They were moving. Arthur Pennyworth had received intelligence, a tip from a frantic and terrified Isabella Vance, that Julian was planning something kinetic tonight. He had hired a crew of ex-mercenaries, men who didn't care about corporate law, only cash. Elena couldn't risk the estate being breached. They were heading to a private airfield to fly to a secure compound in Switzerland. The convoy rolled out of the heavy iron gates, the rain lashing against the bulletproof glass. Elena watched the trees blur by. Her heart was pounding, not for herself, but for the 3 tiny lives sleeping beside her. She reached out and rested her hand on Noah's leg. "I won't let him touch you," she whispered. They reached Route 27, the main artery out of the Hamptons. It was deserted, the streetlights flickering in the gale. "Scanning ahead," the driver said. "Road looks clear. Wait. Heat signature. Tree line." Before he could finish the sentence, a massive oak tree, cut at the base, toppled from the darkness, crashing across the road directly in front of the lead car. The lead vehicle slammed on its brakes, skidding on the wet asphalt. "Ambush!" Cohen yelled into his radio. "Reverse. Execute evasion pattern Delta." But as the driver shifted into reverse, floodlights blinded them from behind. 2 heavy-duty trucks blocked the retreat, boxing them in. "We are pinned," Cohen said, his voice terrifyingly calm. He drew his sidearm. "Ma'am, get down. Cover the children." Elena threw herself over the car seats as the sound of gunfire erupted. Bullets pinged harmlessly off the reinforced chassis of the Escalade. These weren't paparazzi. This was a hit. The doors of the trucks opened, and men in tactical gear swarmed the convoy. They weren't trying to kill everyone. They were trying to breach the main car. They attached something to the door hinge. Explosives. Boom! The door was blown off its hinges, the cabin filled with smoke. "Out! Get her out!" A voice screamed. A voice Elena knew. Rough hands grabbed her, dragging her out into the rain and mud. She fought, scratching and kicking, screaming for her babies. "My children! Don't touch them!" "Shut up!" Julian Thorne slapped her, the force of it knocking her to the wet ground. He looked like a madman. His expensive suit was soaked, his hair wild, his eyes manic. He was holding a pistol. "You thought you could embarrass me?" Julian screamed over the wind. "You thought you could take my company and leave me with nothing?" "Julian, stop!" Elena gasped, wiping blood from her lip. "This is insanity. You'll go to prison for life." "Not if you sign this," Julian hissed, pulling a crumpled document from his jacket. It was a transfer of deed for the Vane fortune and a full custody release. "Sign it. Transfer the funds using your biometric key. Do it now, or I swear to God, Elena, I will make sure you never hear a baby cry again." He pointed the gun toward the car, where the triplets were wailing. Elena looked at the gun, then at the mercenaries holding her security team at gunpoint. She looked at Julian, the man she had once loved. He was gone. This was just a monster. "I can't sign it here," Elena said, her voice shaking. "I need the tablet." "Get it," Julian ordered one of his men. The mercenary reached into the car, but as he leaned in, a red dot appeared on his chest, then on Julian's. Thwip. The mercenary fell silently, a tranquilizer dart in his neck. Julian spun around. "What?" Suddenly, the mercenaries, surrounding the perimeter, turned their weapons, not on Elena's team, but on Julian. From the darkness of the woods, floodlights snapped on, blinding Julian. "Federal agents! Drop the weapon!" The voice boomed from a loudspeaker. A helicopter roared overhead, its searchlight pinning Julian to the spot. Julian froze. He looked at his own hired men. One of them, the leader, stepped forward and removed his balaclava. It wasn't a mercenary. It was Agent Miller of the FBI. "It's over, Thorne," Miller said. "Isabella Vance wore a wire. We've been listening to you plan this kidnapping for 3 days. Your hit squad are undercover agents." Julian looked at Elena. She wasn't crying anymore. She was standing up, brushing the mud from her knees. She looked at him with absolute coldness. "You," Julian gasped, the gun shaking in his hand. "You knew?" "I knew," Elena said, her voice cutting through the storm. "I knew you were too arrogant to accept defeat. I knew you would try to take them by force, so I let you dig your own grave." She stepped closer, ignoring the FBI agents yelling at her to stay back. "You wanted to be a father, Julian. A father protects his children. You just used them as bargaining chips. You are nothing," Julian roared, raising the gun toward her. Bang! A single shot rang out, not from Julian. Julian screamed and dropped the gun, clutching his shoulder. A sniper from the helicopter had taken the shot. He fell to his knees in the mud, writhing in pain. Agents swarmed him, pinning him to the ground and cuffing his hands behind his back. "Julian Thorne," Agent Miller read him his rights as the rain poured down. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, attempted murder, extortion, and violation of the RICO Act." As they dragged him away, he looked back at Elena. She was standing by the car, holding Noah in her arms, shushing him gently. She didn't look up. She didn't watch him go. He had become irrelevant. The skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan pierced the clouds. It was the tallest building in the city, a sleek monolith of glass and steel. The name on the top had changed. It no longer said Thorn Enterprises. It read Vane Trinity Global. Inside the penthouse office, Elena Vane stood looking out at the city she now effectively ruled. She was dressed in a white power suit, her hair styled in soft waves. She looked younger than she had 5 years ago. The stress of the victim was gone, replaced by the glow of the victor. "Ma'am," her assistant said, buzzing in. "The board of directors is waiting, and the representative from the foundation." "Send them in," Elena said, turning around. But before the board members could enter, the double doors burst open. "Mommy!" 3 whirlwinds of energy ran into the room. Noah, holding a toy rocket ship. Elias, clutching a book. Sophia, wearing a plastic tiara that looked suspiciously like the real one Elena owned. They were 5 years old today. Elena dropped to her knees, opening her arms. The impact nearly knocked her over as they tackled her with hugs. "Happy birthday, my loves," she laughed, kissing their cheeks. "Are we going to the zoo?" Sophia asked seriously. "You promised." "After the meeting," Elena promised. "Arthur is waiting downstairs with the car." Arthur Pennyworth, now semi-retired but still Elena's most trusted advisor, leaned against the doorframe, smiling. "They look more like you every day," Arthur said. "Thank God for that," Elena replied. The past 5 years had been a whirlwind. The trial of Julian Thorne had been the trial of the century. The evidence was overwhelming. The audio recordings, the texts, the FBI sting operation. He was sentenced to 35 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole. He had tried to write letters from prison. Elena burned them unopened. She had taken the broken pieces of Thorn Enterprises, purged the corruption, and rebuilt it into an ethical powerhouse. She started the Trinity Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to helping single mothers and victims of domestic financial abuse. She wasn't just a billionaire, she was a symbol. "Mum," Elias said, looking at the massive portrait of the 3 of them that hung behind her desk. "Where is our dad?" It was the question she had dreaded. She knew it would come eventually. Eleanor sat on the floor with them, looking them in the eyes. She didn't lie. She didn't make up a fairy tale. "Your father," Eleanor said softly, "was a man who got lost. He loved money more than he loved people, and because of that, he is in a place where he can't hurt anyone anymore." "Does he love us?" Noah asked. Elena hugged them tighter. "I love you enough for 2 parents. I love you enough for the whole world. And you have Arthur. And you have each other." The kids seemed satisfied with that. They ran off to play with the scale model of the new wind farm Vane Global was building. Arthur walked over to Eleanor. "You've done well, Eleanor. Silas would be proud." "I didn't do it for Silas," Eleanor said, standing up and smoothing her suit. "I did it for the woman in that hospital bed, the one who thought her life was over." She walked to the window one last time. Somewhere, in a concrete cell, Julian Thorne was sitting alone. He had chosen his path. Elena looked at her reflection in the glass. She saw the mother, the CEO, the survivor. "Shall we?" she asked Arthur. "To the meeting?" "No," Elena smiled, grabbing her purse. "To the zoo. The board can wait. My children are the only empire that matters." She walked out of the office, the sound of her children's laughter echoing down the halls of the building she owned in the life she had built, victorious. And that is the incredible twisted story of Eleanor Vane and the karma that hit Julian Thorne harder than a freight train. It's a reminder that true power isn't about money. It's about resilience, and you should never underestimate a mother fighting for her children. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, Please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more dramas like this. What would you have done if you were Elena? Would you have forgiven him, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a part of our next saga. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.